File inclusion is where we are at in the junior penetration tester path. If you want to watch the previous videos, the previous walkthroughs with my twist on this junior penetration tester path, go to my channel and actually look into this playlist that I created especially for it. And so far we have 8 videos undergoing. The previous one was for iDoors, which is that one here. And today we're actually going to go into the file inclusion. Now, let me be perfectly straight with you. In my penetration tests, I haven't met a lot of scenarios where we're dealing with file inclusion issues, because when you have a platform or when you have a web application, so again, before I say that, I want to re-emphasize on the fact that I'm doing these videos not because other people have done it, so other people might have done it on YouTube for many times for these paths, for these rooms on Try Hack Me. And I'm not my intention is not to actually spam the internet with the same content, but I'm doing this learning path here to actually add my own twist to it, and maybe not only serve to help you as a penetration tester, but also to show how I would do or how I would learn penetration testing if I would start it all over again. Alright, so what I wanted to say about file inclusion is that I do not often encounter it in my penetration tests, because when you're dealing with web applications that are custom made, or when you're dealing with web applications, most specifically web applications that have been built on frameworks, it's very least likely to encounter scenarios of file inclusion or scenarios of input validation issues such as XSS or SQL injection, because those platforms or those frameworks, for example, that you're building your web application on have been tested time and again for those issues and have been optimized throughout time, throughout the years. Because if you're dealing with a framework that is 10 years old, you should know that it's least likely to encounter input validation issues because that framework has been tested time and again. So that's what I want to say. Now, this does not actually mean that you're never gonna encounter file inclusion issues or issues similar to this one, but it's very least likely. Now, you're more likely to encounter them if you're dealing with some application or some asset or some whatever you're testing on that's been written from scratch, that's been coded from scratch. Now, those are the situations when you're more likely or most likely to encounter file inclusion and input validation issues. This room aims to equip you with the essential knowledge to exploit file inclusion vulnerabilities, including local file inclusion, RFI, and directory traversal. Now, all of these issues have been put under the umbrella of file inclusion. We will discuss the risks of these vulnerabilities if they're found and require remediation. We provide some practical examples of each vulnerability as well as hands-on challenges. Now, what I want to repeat again for this video is that I'm going to try to keep it in the ballpark of sort of 20 minutes, 20 to 25 minutes at most. So if we're not finishing this room in like efficient time, there are 8 tasks. We're gonna spread this room into multiple videos, which is no problem because there's a lot of room for more videos on YouTube. In some scenarios, web applications are written to request access to files on a given system, including images, static text, and so on via parameters. Parameters are query parameter strings attached to the URL that could be used to retrieve data or perform action based on user input. Now, this is really extremely important. You have to know how a URL is constructed, because this way you'll have an intuition of how the application has been constructed or built. You'll have an application of the functions In this case, we're talking about a get PHP file, so it's a PHP file written, it's a file written or coded in PHP, and then you have a query string begin get PHP. This is a parameter in the URL, but the file might serve as a function in the get PHP file. The following graph explains. So this is really important when you're actually testing, and if you want to be a more inclusive pen tester who actually knows a little bit of secure coding, who is also able to do secure code review, and that's actually something that's gonna get you a lot of money, much more money than you would actually make by just using some other people's tools and doing automation testing on different assets. Now, the following graph explains and breaking down the essential parts of the URL. I wonder who was the reviewer in terms of the grammar for this one. Regardless, we have the protocol HTTP. Other protocols are WebSockets, FTP, SSH, and so on and so forth. You have the domain name, which usually resolves to an IPv4 v6, usually, which actually resolves. You have the file name, in this case, part of the application. We do not know for sure whether the application entirely has been, whether or not the application has been entirely written in PHP, but some parts of it have. You have the parameter, and in this case, you have the argument to the parameter. Alright? For example, parameters are used with Google search engine where GET requests pass user input into the search engine. Alright? If you're not familiar with the topic, you can view the How the Web Works module to understand the concept. What is this? So for those who are beginners, should actually go through this one. We might go through this one in a future video if there is interest to it, and I'm actually going to add my own twist, same as I do with these ones. Now, what I want you to do is go ahead and share this video with people on social media so that I would know that this video is well received, and this actually would motivate me to do more videos, because like I said in previous videos, I don't get anything. I'm not paid. I'm doing this in my free time. So I'm actually, instead of, I don't know, learning something or reading some documentation for a certain framework that I learned to actually improve my skills, or I'm actually working on a project, I'm doing this in my free time, so I don't get anything in return, which is why if you're actually watching this video for free on YouTube, at least share it, because it doesn't cost you anything. The requests may look as follows. If a user wants to access and display their CV or resume within the web application, the request may look as follows. You get the PHP and you specify the file that you want to be displayed, where the file is the parameter and the user CV is the required file to access. So you have the user CV PDF. Actually, the user requesting the file from the server. Web app is served from this directory var app. So when you're actually receiving the request from the user into the server is actually looking into the file get PHP, and actually, since this function has been used, it is actually going to execute whatever that function does. In this case, in the get PHP file, it requests the user CV, which is in, again, var, so /var app CVs, and the user CV. Pretty straightforward. File inclusion vulnerabilities are commonly found and exploited in various programming languages for web applications such as PHP that are poorly written and implemented. The main issue of these vulnerabilities is the input validation, in which the user inputs are not sanitized or validated and the user controls them. What is the risk of file inclusion? Well, of course, the first thing that comes to your mind is that the user may, so the one who's actually the user, the client who's actually accessing the web application, might be able to request files that are not authorized for themselves, such as instead of his own CV, it could access someone else's CV, or in this case, it could access, in that situation, you would be dealing with an IDOR, not only with an IDOR, because if you're talking about files and you're talking about file inclusion issues, you would also be dealing with a situation where the user could access not only files in the CV but go a step above and access files in the app or in www or in var or in Etsy over here, Etsy password, or other files that could reveal sensitive information or information that should not be revealed to the user in light of their permissions. If the attacker can use file inclusion vulnerabilities to read sensitive data, so if the attacker can use file inclusion vulnerabilities to read sensitive data, again, grammar is not their strong point at whoever created this room on TryHackMe. Other than that, it's a good room. So I'm actually revealing my critical nature here. In that case, the successful attack causes to leak of sensitive data, including code and files related to the web application credentials for backend systems. Moreover, if the attacker somehow can write to the server, so in this case, you're not only talking about reading, but also writing, such as the TMP directory, then it is possible to gain remote command execution. So in situations such as this one, you might be able to escalate from file inclusion, so from local file inclusion or from just reading stuff, to remote code execution, which is a very serious issue. And in penetration tests, I'm only seeing this in something that has been written from scratch. Completely custom made application. So for you as a pen tester, it doesn't actually really matter if you're getting or if you're finding a file inclusion or something that can be escalated to a remote code execution, because you're actually paid per project. So you're actually gonna get paid anyways if you find something or if you don't, because you have to fill in the report as you finish your penetration test, and you're gonna get money based on your negotiations beforehand. So if you're working as a penetration tester for a company, you're probably going to be paid on a monthly basis plus some extras. But if you're working as an individual or a contractor penetration tester, then you're actually negotiating on a project basis. Regardless, however, it won't be effective if file inclusion vulnerability is found with no access to sensitive data and no writing ability to the server. So in this case, they're talking about impact. Deploy the virtual machine. Alright. Does it actually make you feel that you're progressing if you just click on the submit here and you get a check mark on the task? I don't see the utility in having this one as a task. Regardless, path traversal, also known as directory traversal, which is a web security vulnerability, allows an attacker to read operating system resources such as local files on the server running an application. The attacker exploits this vulnerability by manipulating and abusing the web application's URL to locate and access files or directories stored outside the application's root directory. So as I've explained to you previously, if your permissions are set correct, you won't be able to access other resources than those that belong to you. And in this case, it's going to be the user CV. So you wouldn't be able to access other CVs from other users, and you also wouldn't be able to access. So if the application is written correctly from a security standpoint, you wouldn't be able to traverse the directory. In this case, move away from the CV directory into app or into www or even more into var, and as I've told you previously, into etc password. So in this case, this is a typical file directory traversal scenario. You're traversing, you're getting out from excuse me. I've choked with my own spit. All right, so you're actually getting out of the CV directory, so by ../. So you're getting out of the CV, you're getting out of the app, the second ..., the third .. You're getting out into www. Another one, the fourth one, you're getting all the way up here, and when you're all the way up here, you could go all the way down there again, or you could move into other directories such as in etc password in this case. So this is a typical directory or path traversal scenario. Let's see how we're standing on time here. 17 more minutes. 17. We can test out the URL parameter by adding payloads to see how the web application behaves. Path traversal attacks, also known as .. attacks, take advantage of moving the directory one step up using the double dots, as I've told you. If the attacker finds the entry point, which in this case is this, then the attacker may send something as follows, like I've told you. Suppose that there is an input validation, and instead of accessing the PDF files at this location, the web application retrieves files from other directories, which in this case it's etc password. Each .. entry moves one directory up until it reaches the root directory. Then it changes the directory to etc, and from there it reads the password file. So you're moving up, then you're changing directory into etc and you're accessing the password file. As a result, the web application sends back the file's content to the user. Similarly, so in this case we're talking about an application that is running in Linux. If the web application runs on a Windows server, the attacker needs to provide a Windows path. For example, if the attacker wants to read boot.ini, then the attacker can try the following depending on the target OS version. So you're not actually sure how many steps you have to go up until you're able to access the boot.ini, because usually in Windows, by default, in a lot of situations, the web is in C inetpub. I believe I'm not actually really sure, but it doesn't have to be in that directory. So if they have placed the web application or installed the server on a different location, you'll have to migrate more, you'll have to move or pivot more or less with .. The same concept applies here as with Linux operating systems, where we climb up directories until it reaches the root directory, which is C. Below are some common OS files you could access when testing. So you do not necessarily have to look for etc password or boot.ini, but you could look for etc issue, etc profile, proc versions. All of these files are usually present in Linux environments. etc password, etc shadow. If you're able to access etc shadow, then that's a serious situation. Bash history is also very sensitive information. It can be very sensitive information. Varlog, dmessage, varmail root, and the only one for Windows is boot.ini. What function causes path traversal vulnerabilities in PHP? What function? Interesting. You can find more information about the function here. File get contents in PHP. Alright, yeah, of course. So I read the question out loud, but I didn't actually process it. So it talks about what function causes path traversal vulnerabilities in PHP, and that's get file contents. Local file inclusion, LFI, against web applications are often due to a developers, and we're probably gonna stop after doing this one. Right. Are often due to a developer's lack of security awareness with PHP. So in this case, they're specifically talking about PHP. Using functions such as include, require, include once, and require once often contribute to vulnerable web applications. In this room, we'll be picking on PHP, but it's worth noting LFI vulnerabilities also occur when using other languages such as ASP, JSP, or even Node.js applications. LFI exploits follow the same concept. So in this case, you should know that if you're testing a Node.js application, you shouldn't be looking, you should be specifically looking for functions that in Node.js, by default, if you're reading the code, might introduce file inclusion issues. In this section, and of course not for PHP if you're testing on Node.js. In this section, we will walk you through various LFI scenarios and how to exploit them. Suppose the web application provides two languages and the user can select between the English and Arabic, I believe. The PHP code, so in this case we have a PHP include get lang. The PHP code uses a get request via the URL parameter lang to include the file of the page. The call can be done by sending the following HTTP request as follows. So you're sending the request like this to load the English page or to load the Arabic page, where en.php and ar.php files exist in the same directory. Theoretically, we can access and display any readable file on the server from the code above if there is no input validation, and in this case there doesn't seem to be any input validation. Let's say we want to read etc password file which contains sensitive information. We can try the following. In this case it works because there isn't a directory specified in the include function and no input validation. So in this case we have a clear file inclusion vulnerability. Now apply what we discussed and try to read the etc password file. Let's see. Is it going to be accessible over here? That's what I'm asking myself. So it's not. What if we just do this? So it's 10.10.127.241. All right, okay. Question 1. Give lab 1 a try to read /etc password. Okay. What would the request be? Probably they're looking for this. So lab1 php file equals etc password. lab1.php question mark file equals etc password. Isn't that what the request URL be like? Do they need to have specified like %2f instead of %2f current path, this one? So lab1.php file equals that's what I did, right? So lab1.php file equals /etc password. Interesting. Let's move on. So where were we? Next, in the following code, the developer decided to specify the directory inside the function. In the above code, the developer decided to use the include function to call PHP pages in the languages directory only via lang parameters. If there is no input validation, the attacker can manipulate the URL by replacing the lang input with other OS sensitive files such as etc password. Again, the payload looks similar to path traversal. But the include function allows us to include any called files into the current page. The following will be the exploit. What is the directory specified in the include function? Languages over here. What is the directory specified? So it's languages. You have to specify it with so this is our current path. Includes so this is the one specified. Now in this case, let's actually move back to lab 1 and go ahead and do etc password one more time. In this case, what would the request URI be? So this is the request URI. lab1.php question mark file equals etc passwd. So that's the answer. lab1.php question mark file equals / etc password, but it says undefined. So I'm not actually really sure what I'm doing wrong here. It's not with capital, of course. But anyway, is it that there is an issue, or is it that I'm not seeing something that I should see? Let me actually look into the write-ups. There are no write-ups. There probably are. So file inclusion write-up, try hack me. Lab 1. What's the deal with this one? It's exactly what I did. So it's exactly what I did. It's / lab1.php question mark file equals / etc password. It's exactly what I did, right? So it's the same thing. But anyways, I believe we should end this video here and then move on with the rest of the tasks in subsequent videos.